Hi, it's Beth here from Modernized Spirituality. So today I'm going to be doing a video on shadow self, what shadow self is and how we can use shadow work to benefit ourselves. Shadow work was discovered by Carl Jung. He kind of discovered the pyramid of consciousness, if you like. So you have your shadow self, which is your subconscious. Then you have yourself, which is, just between like your subconscious and your conscious. And in your conscious, then you have your ego. What shadow self is basically when we're born, we are born with no prior knowledge of any experiences, of any emotions. So we're born as like pure innocent beings as we're coming into the earth. So we're born on like a clean slate, if you like. There's no previous experiences that we're aware of as soon as we're born. So obviously when we're babies and children, we're very dependent on external sources to teach us, in essence, how to behave, and we learn certain behaviours and certain patterns because they are deemed as acceptable and deemed as the normal way to live, so to speak. Because you are dependent on these external factors, you can't fend for yourself as a baby or a child, so you obviously do rely on like a third party. Dependent on the content around the external forces, different parents and different families will have different beliefs. People will have friends with different beliefs, they'll be raised in different areas. So all of these factors will contribute to the development of yourself, the development of your conscious and your subconscious. This could also be social conditioning, so it's not necessarily a particular belief within your family. It could be something that you've learned through media, or just as it's a general social norm. Because we're relying on people other than ourselves to expand, we're obviously adopting ideals from other people. For example, when you were a child, it could have been that you were quite opinionated, quite confident, quite outspoken. Some families, some parents may not see that as an ideal trait to have, so they could have potentially shouted at the child when they were quite outspoken and confident, which then as a child you deem that as unacceptable. You'll suppress this trait of yours, so you'll suppress this part of you because you think that it isn't the acceptable part of you. So then when these certain things are suppressed, then we grow up and we try to ignore that quality or that part of us because we know that it isn't going to be at the approval of others. It goes to this shadow place, and then as we grow older we become more and more distant to that particular memory, to any sort of affiliation with that particular thing that's been suppressed. We just become further and further away from it. Now that's an example with like a positive experience. Well, I say positive, it's a positive trait, if you like. So once you do the shadow work on that particular thing, then it helps you to obviously become more confident, so it will help you to grow. Any sort of shadow work will help you to grow anyway. The whole purpose of it is to help to grow as a person. But in particular, these positive emotions can come out. So some people think that shadow work is all negative emotions, but it isn't. There obviously is going to be things in the shadow that aren't going to be a positive experience. However, that's why they need to be integrated, so they're no longer having an influence without you even being consciously aware of it, because then you can integrate it into your energy field, and it just allows that flow of energy to keep going. For example, if that child that was told not to be outspoken and not to tell their opinions, as they grow older they'll do the opposite. So they'll probably be a really sweet, shy sort of person who doesn't really like conflict, but deep down, being true to themselves, that might not be who they are at all, but it's just because they've been kind of influenced in thinking that that's the acceptable version of them, but they're actually going to be living a life that's not really true to them, which is obviously going to end up being a bit of, a sad life, because you're not being who you actually are. You're literally acting to seek approval from other people. Obviously, shadow work has a lot to do with releasing suppressed emotions, so people can be a little bit sort of scared to do shadow work, and they see it as more of a bad thing, and they prefer positive kind of exercises and things that will just purely rely on positive aspects, which they are really good. They're really useful exercises. However, you're never going to get fully released from that energy that you'll get when you get triggered until you find the root of the issue and until you integrate it. Then you'll be able to feel less resistance and less of a trigger. So in terms of resistance is really important as well. So if you do have a lot of shadow work, a lot of people will just keep resisting and resisting and resisting. People are scared to go back to that memory to relive the emotion that they felt by bringing it up and releasing it. It is hard, I'm not going to lie. The other side of it is just completely worth it in the long run, because when you're constantly being triggered, it's hurting anyway. So even if you don't ever go back to that original memory or that original emotion that you felt and trying to acknowledge it, then it's still going to affect you for the rest of your life, because you've constantly got that stagnant energy there that isn't being released or isn't being unblocked in any way. It's still there, so it's still going to have an effect. I would recommend doing it unless you're in a really, really emotionally unstable way. And on the other side, when you do finally release it, there's so many aspects of yourself that you actually start to discover, because you're not putting on like a facade, you're not putting on a persona. And I think so many people, especially my age, well, a lot of people in general, but what I found is that in my generation there's a very consistent theme, a very common theme of people who just completely put on a fake persona, especially in terms of social media as well. I think social media has a huge impact, and that really does contribute to the shadow self. It's just like you're using more energy to try and resist it, which is actually just feeding it with more energy, which is causing more of a reaction, because you're just feeding it with energy. It is a pendulum where you're feeding it. So you need to break out of the pendulum by just acknowledging it and being quite neutral with it, because otherwise it's just going to keep maintaining the momentum. When it's integrated, you can genuinely feel a greater flow of energy. There's just so many aspects of life that do genuinely change when you start to acknowledge those parts. Everybody's got a shadow self. Everyone will always have a shadow self unless they're fully enlightened. So it's completely normal to have these aspects of us, because it was a way that we decided that we had to survive as children and as babies. We just created these kind of coping mechanisms, which they all do have their purpose as well. I think the whole point in life is to have all of these experiences throughout childhood and throughout being very young, and then as you become an adult, then it's your responsibility to then go back to those experiences and unlearn all of the behaviours and all of the patterns that you did learn. Because otherwise, if you do keep these patterns and these behaviours, if they are maintained on a regular basis, then you're gonna really struggle to create the life that you want, because you're focusing on the wrong things, you're directing specific attention to the wrong things, even though you don't think you are, subconsciously you are. And it all genuinely does matter, even if you're not consciously aware of it. But once you do make a conscious decision to start to work on the shadow self, then it just, it changes the ego as well, because obviously it's kind of like a pyramid. So the shadow self will then have an effect on the ego. It has an effect on how you act regardless. If you'd like me to do a video on ways that you can actually try and work on your shadow self, just let me know, because I can definitely give some suggestions on what worked for me. I've tried a few exercises. Obviously it's still a process, but it's something that I've been working on for the past over 6 months now. So I have learned quite a few different techniques that I find really useful. But that's why I'm saying kind of like, it's not just about focusing on all of the positive aspects. It obviously is. You have to stay in that positive mindset. However, if you don't acknowledge the past issues that are causing emotional reactions and that are inhibiting your skills and your experiences now, then you know it needs to be acknowledged, basically. But then you end up on a much smoother route in life. You end up on a path that feels like you're more gliding through life, rather than trying to like sludge through life, like going through every day like just like that. And now it's more like you're excited for each day regardless of what happens. You understand that every day is like a new day, it's a fresh day, it's more present. It's easier to look forward to things, it's easier to find gratitude in smaller things, it's easier to find appreciation in small things. It's just an easier life, to be honest, once you acknowledge it. Because, like I say, your triggers aren't there all the time, and just think about how amazing it would be to not get constantly triggered. Let me know if you want a video on that, and I hope this has given you a little bit of insight. I find the shadow self really interesting because it has such an influence on so many different patterns within your life without you realising. So yeah, let me know if you want any more videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Please like, share and subscribe. Bye!